Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
It's time again to dive deeper into the state's top news. Join us for our monthly's Reporters Roundup. Stay tuned. Dialogue is next. I'm Joan Cartan-Hansen. Thank you for joining us here on Idaho Public Television, on the World Wide Web, and on public radio stations. Lots of education news this month. The state put out requests for bids for computers for those high schoolers in the classroom. The State Board of Education raised tuition again at the state's colleges and universities. The University of Idaho's faculty voted for health benefits for, quote, qualified adults who share households with a U of I employee. We'll explain that. And there's that pesky primary election coming up. Do you know how you're going to vote? Not who you're going to vote for, but do you know how you're actually going to vote this time around? Big changes, and not everybody's happy about it. So joining me now to talk about the stories we're having this month are four reporters. Let's first go up to our Moscow studio. Brandon Max, a reporter with the Moscow Pullman Daily News. Brandon, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And here in Boise is Jesse Bonner, reporter with Associated Press. Jesse, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Dan Popke, political reporter and columnist with the Idaho Statesman. Dan, thank you. And my public television colleague, Greg Hahn, host of Idaho Reports. Greg, thanks for being here.
Thanks.
And of course, we want to hear from you. Let us know what you think. You can send me an email at dialogue@idahoptv.org, or you can post on our Facebook page. Let's jump into the first news. That's the Tom Luna post-session tour. He kicked off his tour this thing. Jesse, what did Tom Luna tell people when he got out on the road?
Well, it was, he kicked it off in Nampa earlier this month, and it was a very positive message. There was an increase in state support this year of 4.6%, but when you're looking at the overall budget, including federal funds, it's an actual, smaller increase. I think it's less than 1%, but that's, due to a drop-off in stimulus dollars. We don't have that coming through. But, it was mostly a really positive message. He was out there to tell teachers, one of the biggest pieces of his reform plan that people didn't like is that it shifted money away from salaries. And his message was, we saw the legislation passed at the end of the 2012 session that did away with those declines in future years. And so that was his main message. This was one of the biggest parts that you guys didn't like about this plan, and we're doing away with it. So it was mostly positive. I think he ran into some harsh criticism over in Pocatello. So the tour maybe got bumpier as it went along. He had a public forum over there, and there's still a lot of questions about the reform plan that people have. There's still some teachers who said, their morale is still pretty low after, amid, all the controversy over that. So
let's ask Brandon, how did his tour play up north?
I wasn't really involved in any of the tour. The only last time I saw Tom Luna was during the state board meeting here last week. I haven't really heard much about it. I believe he did meet up with some schools here. I wasn't involved in those meet and greets that he had up here.
Is the reform measure, is this the calm before the storm, before people up north start talking about the ballot measures that are going to talk about education funding and education reform?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Is this kind of the calm before the storm as people start to think about those ballot measures we'll see in the fall?
I'd say so. There hasn't been a lot of dialogue about that right now. Looking forward to hearing that as we get closer to making those decisions on the ballot. I'll be curious to see what happens, especially when we're looking at that bid process for those laptop computers, a $60 million cost, and whether or not we'll even be able to go through with that.
Well, you've done a beautiful segue for me. That's the second news that you've got. You actually had to get a public records request to find out about the
department. The Division of Purchasing, which is within the Department of Administration, requested that I submit a public records request to actually see the request for proposals that went out. You know, Brandon mentioned the 60 million figure. We should point out that's to phase in the computers for the first 5 years. That's just to get all of the computers into the hands of every high school student, every teacher, and that's the estimated cost. I mean, there'll be costs after that, I'm sure, for the upkeep and maintenance and things like that, but that's the upfront figure.
Politically, how's that coming across?
Well, I think after the primary, you'll see both sides in the referendum fight get active, and I expect we're going to have very vigorous campaigns with a lot of money spent.
Yeah, I was saying, with Luna hardly showed up at the legislative session this year after last year, where it was all about him and all about these reform bills. And now I think Dan's right. Is pretty soon you're going to see him again all over the place, because he's going to have to get out there and champion these ideas once again.
Well, yeah, when he kicked off his legislative tour, he said, you know, this is the first year I've taken a break after the legislative session, and I took that to mean, you know, he didn't have to immediately, it's not like last year where he had to hit the road and go try to win support for this package of really polarizing changes.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to me, I think, how much movement there is early on in next semester, you know, how much it shows in the classroom before people have a chance to vote on this, because I don't think it's going to be very much, and it's still going to be kind of this
Teachers will have laptops,
question.
You know,
in those designated schools, not every school.
And like about a third of the schools.
Yeah.
Well, every teacher will get a laptop this fall, though. But we'll
but
also
the schools only get the kids only get it in.
But that's not until the following year.
Right, that's in 2013. Yeah. But we should also point out that the teachers know their bonus money is coming in November. That's when the state is going to pay out the money. Teachers over the past year have been graded under their district's new pay-for-performance system. Some of those systems included parental input, which was really interesting. The parents got to grade how their kids' teachers were doing. And so that's another thing that I think will be a factor. You know, it's like not only will they have the laptops, but they'll also have that bonus money coming.
Right. The state board, as Brandon said, the State Board of Education met and raised tuition. Brandon? Go ahead and tell us about the tuition increases. U of I didn't get everything they wanted.
Oh no, that's usually the case how it goes up here. And of course, yes, there was a 6.1% increase that was approved, and it seemed there was about, I think it was about 5 to 2 that I was approved by, and there was a lot of talk, I understand, just, you know, not wanting to look at tuition increases as the end-all, be-all solution to funding higher education, and the argument being, you know, from the university, if the state funding would just, you know, come up here and try to meet with us, we wouldn't have to keep increasing the tuition. But right now, I think the university is working really hard to try to find ways to, you know, to alleviate those tuition increases that they seem to be seeing every year. And of course, UI President Dwayne Nellis is getting ready to launch this fundraising campaign that's coming up here. And it looks like, if I understand correctly, they're more than halfway through their $225 million goal right now. And I'll be interested in seeing how that progresses.
And I had a couple other bit of news, and let's talk about the Benoit family settlement. The state board approved a $375,000 settlement with the family.
Yeah, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall during their executive session on that. Unfortunately, it was a very brief approval, and we were spending a lot of time waiting to see what would come of that. I tried to approach UI counsel Kent Nelson right after the vote. They were very adamant about us waiting until they could get together a joint statement on that. And then the next day, Friday, we were able to get the document released, the withdrawal of their complaint against the University of Idaho and the conditions for that. Of course, the $375,000, the Benoit family says they're going to put that towards a memorial fund in Katie Benoit's name. I think that was always our expectation, was that something like that was going to happen. My understanding is the Benoit family is pretty well off, and I don't think it was ever, like they indicated, about the money. I think it was about making sure that the University of Idaho backed up its statements. They had an independent review panel looking at the safety protocols that were in place and looking at ways of improving that. And I think the Benoit family was really wanting to see them go through with that. And I think if they had to kind of hold them to the fire, that's how it's going to be. And now there's going to be, I guess, an annual training the beginning of every, I believe, school year, and that I think will really kind of keep the incident and Katie Benoit's name and the feelings that generated going on, and I think that means a lot more to them than any kind of monetary compensation could, when you're considering a human life and a daughter and a sister.
Yeah, yeah. Jesse?
Well, yeah, I thought, you know, I was surprised to see all the programs and things that the university had agreed to as part of this. You know, I think when we heard that the family had filed, you know, a $3 million tort claim back in December, you know, the figure I think surprised me as well how low it was. So the family was very clear about that. You know, it wasn't about the money for them. It was like making sure that steps were put in place to where something like this didn't happen again. Okay.
Yeah, and I think the follow-through is going to be interesting. And I think it's going to be interesting if other schools, as the details come out, you know, they're going to more fully investigate allegations, improve communications with the police, improve sexual harassment training. You know, I haven't talked to anyone at the two other big schools, but I wonder if they're taking a look at what they've got. They could kind of use these as a guideline to maybe get ahead of this before, you know, they have to deal with it, I suppose, on their own campuses.
Okay. The other news out of the University of Idaho was the vote by the faculty to, and I have to kind of get the right, to allow health benefits to, quote, qualified adults who share households with U of I employees. Brandon, why the odd phrasing?
I think they just thought that might pass the state's muster there. They were looking at domestic partners, and they realized that probably isn't going to fly very well in the state of Idaho, especially considering in this past legislative session they again knocked down the addition of homosexuality to the Idaho Human Rights Act, which I guess was not so much surprising. It seems to happen on an annual basis. This move was more, I guess, just a way to kind of tiptoe around it and see if it might pass. President Nellis said he wasn't sure if it would. Basically, what they're going to do is say that if you are living with a UI employee and you are, you know, financially, you know, responsible for each other, you know, they will allow these benefits to go through. Of course, Nellis has not yet approved it, and he still has indicated that he has some concerns as to whether or not there might be some challenge to this.
Well, what do you think? How do you think the legislature is going to react?
Well, I do know it's not an unusual. Businesses around the state,
I mean,
businesses around the state do it. They don't have to go to the legislature to get approval for it.
And it'll go through the rulemaking process, right? So it will be an issue if they actually approve the domestic partnership payment. I mean, there's no question about it being an issue. But you know, whether you're going to get both houses to, or one house to overturn it, right? I always get confused about that.
It all depends on which.
But I suspect President Nellis is trying to figure out that calculus before he puts his pencil or pen to an approval.
We're going to jump into that. May 15th is the primary. Now, first of all, because of reapportionment, you may need to figure out a new place to vote. So that's the first thing that you have to figure out as you're going to go to vote for your May primary. But there's a lot more to figure out about it. I talked with Phil McGain, who's the Ada County Chief Deputy Clerk, to explain why he says this is the most complicated election he's ever had to deal with.
This is the first closed primary in Idaho, so there's going to be some decisions that have to be made this election. The big part is you're going to have to affiliate with a party for the first time. Once you've affiliated or chosen to remain unaffiliated, you'll have some decisions to make in terms of what ballot you decide to vote. And so there'll be some ballot decisions this election as well.
So when I walk in, I have to choose whether I'm going to be a Democrat, a Republican, or unaffiliated?
You'll have 5 choices in terms of what party you may affiliate with. So you can choose the Constitutionalist, a Libertarian, Democrat, Republican, or remain unaffiliated. And then based on what choice you make there will determine what ballot. There are 3 ballot choices for this election. So there's a Democrat ballot, a Republican ballot, and a nonpartisan ballot. And so depending on what party you chose to affiliate with or whether you remained unaffiliated will determine what ballots you get to choose.
So if I say I'm a Republican, I get a Republican ballot?
If you're a Republican, you may choose any one of those 3 ballots. You may choose to vote the Republican ballot, or you may also choose to vote the Democrat ballot or the nonpartisan ballot.
And if I choose to be a Democrat?
If you choose to be a Democrat, You may choose either the Democrat ballot or the nonpartisan ballot, but you may not vote the Republican ballot. The Republican Party has closed their primary.
And if I choose unaffiliated or libertarian or one of the other third parties, what ballot choices do I have?
Then your choices are the same as if you're a Democrat. You may choose the Democrat ballot or the nonpartisan ballot.
You can't change your mind once you've picked a party affiliation or a ballot.
That's correct. Once the voter has made that decision and they've got a ballot in hand, they can't change their mind. The election workers can reissue a new ballot, but they always have to reissue the same ballot. So it's really important for voters to know in advance what the impact of their decision, so that they have the right ballot, make the right decision the first time, so that they're happy throughout the entire process. But we encourage voters to be prepared. It's not too dissimilar when you go to the airport and you're prepared to go through TSA. The more we can have voters prepared to go through all these decisions when they go to the polls, the easier and more streamlined it will be for the voters. And we'll avoid long lines and a lot of the other issues that could come up on Election Day.
But you don't have to take your shoes off.
You don't have to take your shoes off to vote.
The election workers are really concerned that people are going to get to the ballot and get to the primary to vote and are going to be totally confused. And then if they go unaffiliated and they only get the nonpartisan ballot here, at least in Ada County, you have 3 uncontested races, 3 judges who have no opponents of it. They're going to be pissed. So how worried are election officials that we're going to have a lot of angry people election day?
Phil and his boss, Chris Rich, were in at the Statesman yesterday kind of going over the same stuff as he did with you. And I guess first I'll say the most difficult election for him, I mean, he's no Pete Cianerusa. He hadn't been around that long, but it is going to be, I think, there are going to be some angry people. They've added in Ada County 100 poll workers. They are concerned about people who get that nonpartisan ballot and say, why did there's no choice for me here. Why are you giving me this? They tear it up. It costs them 32 cents every time they tear it up. And then they have to hand them another one and hand them another one.
The same thing.
So I think it's going to be, there'll be some small dramas around, and it's going to take people. We've had the same system for generations, and we're changing it, and it's going to be hard for people to adjust.
And first of all, so that people don't yell at the election workers, who do they thank for this change?
Well, the Republican majority in the legislature, yeah, and the state Republican Party. It's been their policy to close the primary now for a number of years, and they finally won a lawsuit in federal court, and the legislature implemented what the judge told them they had to do, basically.
One of the other factors of this is now that the party affiliation you pick and the ballot you pick, because you can conceivably pick one party and then pick a ballot of the other party. If you're a Republican, you could do both, are now going to be public record. Now, I'm a big proponent of public records because it's really the only way we can keep track and make sure everything's on the up and up. But for some people, including reporters, judges, other people, they don't like the idea that someone can go in and look and see how they voted. You're a journalist, let's walk around the state and the table. How are you dealing with the idea of whether you're going to vote and identify a political party, or that you are?
Well, you know, for me it was pretty easy. In fact, when I was still at the Statesman, was one of the big advocates of saying, look, if you're involved at all covering politics, this is one of the things you're going to have to give up. I lucked out. I sort of registered when I went to college in California as a Midwestern kid, and just showed up and got my first chance to register, and they're like, what party? And I'm like, independent. I don't want to be part of no party. And so from the very beginning I was that way, and it kind of worked out nicely for my job. But I think, yeah, I'll go and vote for some judges who aren't racing each other. And I really find myself in the minority even among reporters, because I kind of see the primaries are the moments when the parties get together and decide who's going to run. It's not the vote. The vote's in November. And granted that sometimes you don't have any other choices, and I know I've been on the losing end of arguments with a lot of folks on this over the past few months, but that's kind of the way I've looked at it. That either of the two parties have a chance they can do it their way, and if it's public, I won't participate. I don't go to the caucuses for either party. I mean, there are a lot of things that I just opt not to do.
I came from California where you had to register by party, and here you're 26. And I thought it was great. I could pick and choose, and nobody knew. And I agree with Greg. I don't feel, as somebody covering politics, that I can vote in either party's primary and have it be known. I mean, when it was secret, it was another thing. That's all I got to say about it. I mean, I just don't think you can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of you, but I mean, I think you're talking about being the minority. You know, I made a decision when I was in journalism school just not to vote, you know, just to protect my,
But even in the general election when nobody knows, because in the general election you won't have to go through this stuff.
Sure, I mean, you know how you voted, you know. I just, it's a decision I made just to, you know, just to always, so I could feel like I was being impartial, so.
Do you give money to the Humane Society?
I do. I adopted a beautiful little Labrador named Buddy, and so I do give to the Humane Society, but it's not very much.
Let's find out how Brandon, what are you going to do?
I'm going to just try to keep myself busy, I guess, covering the primary and try not to think about it too much. Or I could just, you know, get the nonpartisan ballot and just, you know, vote for uncontested judges, which is something that came up with our county clerk. She's having troubles with that whole nonpartisan ballot. People are requesting it, not realizing they don't have any choices except for the justices and possibly a school levy if it's in their
Yeah, there are some issues on the ballot in some places, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there are issues. I think I can probably wait until the general election. I do feel kind of poorly in that I don't have that choice, that I can make it to go ahead and participate. I feel journalism is, you know, we kind of started as these watchdogs of government, you know, because we were concerned citizens, and part of being, you know, in the citizenry is having that liberty to choose who's representing you. You know, so it feels a little bit bad in that way, but you know, it's something that you know, I think it's one of those things you kind of give up, I guess, as Jesse was saying, when you take this position.
All right, well, let's talk about some of the races. We're going to start walking through some of the primary races that are happening, and if we don't get through them all, we'll pick up again in the web extra afterwards. So let's start with the top of the ticket, the 2 congressional races.
Well, for top of the ticket,
aside
it's
the president,
it's not really driving a whole lot of votes probably this year.
So that first, how about the first CD? We've got Cynthia Klingenberg, Jimmy Ferris as Democrats. Pro-life is back, independent. Rob Oates, Libertarian. Raul Labrador, Republican, challenged by Reed McCandless.
There's no real race in there. Ferris is going to win on the Democratic side. Klingenberg faces 3 felony charges for allegedly pointing a pistol at some people at Staples when she was trying to arrange to get some campaign posters. Not a good way to start your campaign. She's facing a mental health hearing, and so Ferris wins that, presumably. And then the incumbent, Raul Labrador, Reed McCandless, I don't know if Brandon knows anything about him. He's from Latah County, I believe. He doesn't have an active campaign.
He's taking one of those, I guess, wannabe politician stances of, I just want to listen and I'll make my decisions on a case-by-case basis. I guess one thing to say about Klingenberg, at least, you know, you have a Democrat that's pro-gun choice, you know, pro-gun rights. So that's something to think about. That might help them a little bit. But no, Reed McCandless, I've had one or 2 meetings with him in the past, and my understanding is that he drives truck, I think, in Montana, and I'm not sure if he's even really in the race anymore.
Has it got McCandless on the side of the truck?
No, I don't think he actually has his own trucking company. I think
a number of fringe candidates do use that method.
Yeah.
The big billboard on the truck.
Try on the side. Well, anyway. Okay. Well, let's go on to the 2nd congressional district. Now we actually have a debate. Correct?
That's right. Well, the first there are actually 2 primary races. There's one in the Democratic Party between Jacqueline Chappell, who's ran a few times, kind of a colorful Idaho character, and Nicola Favor, who was in the legislature from Boise, decided to retire from the Senate, and then decided to go ahead and use that capital she built up for this race, which I know a lot of the Democrats were excited about. The Republican primaries, that's where we do have the debate. Well, on May 13th, Mother's Day, what better way to spend Mother's Day
than with your mom
which is
watching the
this is the second time these 2 have debated on Mother's Day, 2 years ago. Mike Simpson, congressman from Eastern Idaho, 2nd District, 7 terms. He's facing Chick Heilson, who's kind of on the Tea Party, strict constitutional reading of what to do, and he's sort of coming at Simpson from the right, which wasn't a big surprise. But there was some question of whether there were going to be a big name candidate in that race, and it didn't pan out so much.
Will the change in the primary the closed primary, could it make an impact?
It might have if Heilson had been running an active campaign like he did 2 years ago. 2 years ago, he raised over $120,000 and spent it. This year, he hasn't filed an FEC report, which means he hasn't even raised $5,000, and the primary's on May 15th. So, you know, this might have been a better year for him structurally with the closed primary, but I don't think the Tea Party has the same oomph that it did 2 years ago. So, Heilson, remember, got 24%, and I think it's great of Simpson to appear with him, but boy, it would take you know, a sort of Edwin Edwards scale mistake for Simpson to lose, I think.
We're running out of time, and when we go into our Web Extra, we'll start picking up with the legislative races. But there's one legislative race we want to before we leave you, to make sure we discuss the Senator McKenzie, his race. His race. He won 6th place in the performance in the physique competition in the American Bodybuilding Fitness and Figure Treasure Valley Axiom National Championship. You can see pictures of him on Dan's blog.
Yes.
So is winning a physique contest going to have an impact on his legislative
Well,
race?
the guy he's running against, whose name is Osborne, Senator McKenzie's 43 years old and a very attractive man. And Osborne's 71. And he said, I wouldn't do that.
He's probably not so bad looking.
That's not so. No, he's a
bad
nice looking guy. But he's 71, and he said, well, you know, I'm not intimidated. I think I could take him at arm wrestling, and he unlike Tiger Woods, who prefers the 9-iron for conflict, Osborne uses a 5-iron and says he feels comfortable with a 5-iron on his side. So they are actually debating tonight over in Nampa. That was nice of you to bring it up, Joan.
Of course, we all went and looked at those pictures.
The senator put it on his Facebook page.
Well,
I mean,
there you go.
he was proud of what he did.
His Facebook page was probably never more visited than today. I went. I looked at all 14 pictures.
And your critique?
You know, he was
For a state senator? He's looking good for a
Would
state
you have ranked
senator.
him higher than 6th?
Oh, I didn't get a closer look at the other guys. I was more in shock at seeing the senator.
But if you ranked him only with other legislators,
he was. Just
no
for those
contest,
who may not, may be trying to decide whether to look at the photos. He is wearing board shorts. It's not like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the underwear. You know, it's.
Which he pointed out. It's more dignified, I guess.
This is a competition. This is something you trained for.
Yeah.
We're kind of making fun of it.
Who knew, though? Did we know this?
And he says he worked hard. In fact,
you knew he worked out. I mean, you didn't need to see him with his shirt off to know that guy was fit.
We've run out of time. So when we come back in the Web Extras, let me say thank you to Brandon up in Moscow. Appreciate that, Jesse. Craig, Dan, appreciate you all being here.
Thank you.
So as I said, we're going to continue the discussion on our Dialogue Web Extra, and you'll find that and more information on the Dialogue website. Go to idahoptv.org and click on Dialogue. And I also invite you to become a friend on Facebook or follow us on Twitter. Thanks for tuning in, and join us here next time for Dialogue.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho. Check out our website, become a friend on Facebook, or follow us on Twitter.